No one in the city remembered a time when Victor Hale could hear a sound. The billionaire had been born deaf, and by the age of 40, his silence had become part of his legend. People spoke about his wealth, his cold intelligence, his towering glass mansion, but always in whispers, always with careful glances, as if sound itself feared him. He ruled boardrooms with his eyes and hands alone, reading lips, watching every movement, missing nothing. Some called him powerful. Others called him broken. Victor never corrected them. Inside his mansion, the world moved quietly. Staff were trained to communicate with signs, notes, and soft expressions. Music never played. Phones never rang. Even laughter seemed muted, swallowed by thick walls and polished floors. Victor preferred it that way. Silence was the only thing he'd ever known, and it was the only thing he trusted. That is why no one understood why he hired her. Elena arrived on a rainy morning, carrying nothing but a small bag and a calm confidence that didn't match her position. She was just a maid, newly hired, barely mentioned in the long list of household staff. Yet from the moment she stepped inside, something felt different. She didn't rush. She didn't avoid Victor's gaze. When their eyes met, she didn't look away like the others did. Instead, she smiled, slow and gentle, as if she already knew him. Victor noticed. He always noticed. Over the next few days, Elena worked quietly, but Victor found his attention drifting toward her more than it should have. She moved with purpose, but also with care. She watched him closely, not with pity, but with curiosity. Once, while cleaning the study, she placed a handwritten note on his desk instead of leaving silently. It simply said, "Silence doesn't mean empty." Victor stared at the words longer than he wanted to admit. Strange things began to happen. Victor started feeling vibrations he had never noticed before. A faint hum in the walls. A pressure in his chest when Elena was near. He told himself it was stress, imagination, nothing more. He had spent his life accepting the limits of his world. Miracles were for other people. But Elena seemed to carry secrets in the way she looked at him, in the way her hand always rested over her pocket, as if guarding something small but powerful. Victor caught her one night standing outside his office after hours, holding something wrapped in cloth, her face tense with hesitation. When he gestured, asking what she wanted, Elena didn't write a note. She reached into her pocket. Victor's heart began to race as she slowly pulled out the object, her hand steady, her eyes locked on his. Whatever it wasn't supposed to be there. And for the first time in his life, the man who controlled everything felt truly unprepared. Because if Elena was about to do what he feared she might, the silence that defined his entire existence was about to be shattered forever. Victor's eyes stayed fixed on Elena's hand, his mind racing faster than his calm face would ever reveal. He raised a single finger, signaling her to stop. The mansion felt even quieter than usual, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Elena hesitated, then slowly lowered her hand. The cloth still wrapped tightly around whatever she had pulled from her pocket. She nodded, understanding his silent command, and stepped back. But the moment past did nothing to ease the tension. If anything, it made it heavier. That night, Victor couldn't sleep. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, memories drifting back to a childhood shaped by silence. Doctors had examined him endlessly when he was young. They spoke to his parents in low voices, using words like permanent and unlikely. His mother had cried quietly, holding his tiny hands, while his father learned sign language late into the night. Victor grew up watching mouths move without sound, learning to read emotions instead of voices. It made him sharp, observant, and distant. By the time he built his empire, he trusted logic, not hope. The next morning, Victor summoned his head assistant and requested Elena's file. What came back was thin. Too thin. No long work history. No clear references. Just a recent background check that somehow passed without detail. Victor frowned. In his world, information was power, and missing information was danger. He began to wonder who Elena really was and how she had slipped so easily into his carefully controlled life. Elena continued her duties as if nothing had happened. She cleaned, organized, and worked alongside the other staff, blending in when needed. But Victor noticed small things. She often lingered near rooms with old medical equipment he had stored away years ago. She glanced at framed childhood photos, her expression soft, almost familiar. Once, Victor caught her tracing a finger along a bookshelf that held thick medical journals about hearing loss, nerve damage, and experimental treatments. When she noticed him watching, she stepped back quickly, her face unreadable. Late that afternoon, Victor received an unexpected message on his private tablet. It wasn't from his staff or business partners. It was anonymous. The message was short and unsettling. Some silences are not natural. Ask the maid why she's here. Victor felt a chill run through him. He looked up instinctively, scanning the room, but saw nothing out of place. As days passed, Victor became more withdrawn. He skipped meetings, canceled calls, and spent more time watching Elena from a distance. He began reviewing old medical reports from his birth, noticing details he had ignored before. A test result that didn't make sense. A doctor's signature that appeared only once. A treatment that was suggested but never explained. Questions he had never asked started demanding answers. Elena sensed a shift. One evening, she left another note on Victor's desk. This one was longer. What you were told as a child may not be the whole truth. I didn't come here by accident, and what I'm carrying is not a promise. It's a risk. Victor's hands trembled slightly as he read it. From a hallway, Elena watched him, clutching the cloth-wrapped object tightly against her chest. She knew the moment was coming, whether either of them was ready or not. And somewhere between fear and hope, Victor realized that his silence might not be a condition he was born with, but something that had been taken from him. Victor began watching the mansion the way he once watched markets before a major deal, quietly and with sharp focus. Every hallway, every staff member, every routine suddenly felt like a puzzle. The silence he had lived in for decades now felt crowded with unanswered questions. Elena moved through the house like she belonged there, yet she never crossed certain lines. She never entered his private bedroom. She never touched the locked cabinet where he kept his earliest medical records. It was as if she knew exactly how far she could go. From Elena's side, the weight of the secret grew heavier each day. She had accepted this job knowing the risk, knowing that once Victor began to question his past, there would be no turning back. At night, in the small staff room, she took out the cloth-wrapped object and studied it under dim light. It was old, carefully preserved, and far more advanced than anyone would expect. She remembered the warnings she had been given before coming here. If Victor ever found out too much too fast, powerful people would notice. Victor decided to test her. During dinner one evening, he deliberately dismissed the other staff early, leaving only Elena in the room. He pretended to review documents on his tablet, then casually pushed a page across the table. It was a medical report from his childhood, enlarged and highlighted. Elena froze. Her fingers tightened around the serving tray, and for just a second, the calm mask slipped from her face. Victor saw it clearly. Fear, not for herself, but for what might come next. Elena wrote slowly on her notepad, choosing each word with care. Some treatments don't heal. Some hide. Victor felt his chest tighten. He gestured sharply, asking who had hidden it and why. Elena shook her head. Not yet. Her eyes darted toward the security cameras in the corners of the room, a silent reminder that they were never truly alone. Elsewhere in the mansion, someone was paying attention. Victor's chief of security, Marcus, had noticed a change in his employer. Meetings canceled, private file requests, late-night access to restricted data. Marcus had protected Victor for years, but even loyalty had limits. When an old contact reached out, asking whether the experiment had shown signs of instability, Marcus didn't answer right away. He simply watched Elena on the surveillance feed, her hands always near her pocket, her presence raising more questions than answers. Meanwhile, Victor dug deeper into his family's past. He discovered a sealed agreement between his late father and a private medical firm, signed just weeks after Victor's birth. The firm no longer existed, but its name appeared in other places. Lawsuits, vanished researchers quietly settled claims. One line stood out: auditory suppression to be maintained until further notice. Victor stared at the words, his breath shallow. Suppression? Not damage. Not loss. The mansion felt smaller now, the silence heavier than ever. Elena and Victor were circling the same truth from different sides, both aware that revealing could change everything. And somewhere beyond the walls, forces that had buried the truth once were beginning to stir again, ready to protect their secrets at any cost. Victor stopped attending public meetings altogether. The billionaire who once commanded attention with a single glance now kept himself hidden behind the mansion's gates. Inside, the silence pressed against him harder than ever. Every document he uncovered pointed to the same truth. His deafness was not a natural condition, but something controlled, maintained, and protected by powerful interests. The more he learned, the more dangerous his curiosity became. Elena felt the shift immediately. Security checks increased. Cameras were adjusted. Marcus appeared more often in the hallways, his watchful eyes never leaving her. She knew time was running out. The object she carried was not meant to stay hidden this long. Each day it remained in use increased the risk, not just for Victor, but for herself. Still, she waited, hoping Victor would be ready to choose the truth on his own. One evening, a storm rolled in, thunder shaking the mansion's walls. Victor stood alone in his study, reading the final recovered file on his tablet. It described a prototype device designed to bypass suppressed auditory pathways. Tested on infants, never approved, officially erased. At the bottom of the report was a handwritten note from a doctor whose name Victor recognized from Elena's file. Her grandfather. The connection hit him like a physical blow. At the same moment, Elena was stopped outside the study by Marcus. He blocked her path, his expression calm but firm. He signed a simple question. "What are you carrying?" Elena met his gaze without flinching. She wrote back, something that was stolen. Marcus didn't move aside. Instead, he touched his earpiece, silently alerting someone else. Victor felt it before he saw it. The mansion's lights dimmed slightly as backup power systems activated. A lockdown. His heart pounded. He stood, moving toward the door just as Elena pushed past Marcus, her calm finally cracking. She rushed into the study and locked the door behind her, hands shaking as she pulled the cloth-wrapped object from her pocket. For the first time, Victor saw it clearly. Small, precise, designed with care. Not a miracle, not magic, but proof. Proof that his life had been shaped by decisions made without his consent. Elena's eyes filled with tears as she held out to him. She signed slowly, deliberately. Once this starts, there's no going back. Outside the study, voices rose. Security keys beeped. Someone demanded access. Victor's mind raced. He thought of his parents, of the silence he had accepted as fate, of the empire he built without ever hearing a single word. He looked at Elena and realized she had risked everything to bring him this moment. Thunder crashed again, closer this time. The door began to unlock. Victor reached out, his fingers hovering just above the device, knowing that whatever he chose next would change not only his world, but expose a truth powerful people had buried for decades. Victor's hand froze in the air as the first lock clicked open from the outside. The device in Elena's palm felt heavier than it looked, like it carried not just answers, but consequences. Before he could touch it, Elena pulled it back slightly, her eyes darting to the walls. She shook her head and signed urgently, "Not here." Her gaze lifted toward the ceiling, toward the hidden microphones Victor suddenly remembered were installed years ago, back when he still trusted the systems around him. Another metallic click echoed through the door. Someone on the other side was running out of patience. Victor turned away from the device and moved to his desk, opening a hidden panel with a practiced motion. Inside was a private server drive he rarely used, one that stored backups of everything he ever questioned. He signed to Elena to place the device inside. She hesitated, then obeyed, wrapping it carefully before tucking it into the compartment. Just as Victor closed the panel, the door burst open. Marcus entered first, followed by two security officers. Their faces were tight, controlled. Marcus signed quickly, his movements sharp. "You're not safe. Both of you." Victor narrowed his eyes. The words didn't match the tone. This wasn't concern. It was warning. Before Victor could respond, his tablet buzzed violently on the desk. An incoming call forced its way through security filters. No name, no number, just a symbol Victor hadn't seen since his father's funeral. He answered. The screen filled with the face of an older man, calm and familiar, Dr. Harlan Reeves, the same doctor whose signature appeared on the suppression report. The man Victor believed had died decades ago. Dr. Reeves smiled slightly, as if greeting an old friend. His lips moved slowly, clearly. You were never meant to find a device, he said. Victor read every word. Your silence protected more than just you. Elena stepped forward, her face pale. She recognized him instantly, the man who destroyed her family, the man who turned research into control. She wrote furiously on her pad, shoving it toward Victor. He lied. The device isn't the first one. Reeves continued, unfazed. There are others like you, Victor, children who were adjusted, modified, observed. You were simply the most successful. His eyes flicked toward Elena, and she was sent to undo years of careful work. Outside the study, alarms began to sound softly, signaling a network breach. Victor realized someone was accessing his systems remotely. His data, his secrets, his life. Marcus glanced between Victor and the screen, conflict written all over his face. For the first time, Victor saw doubt in the man who had guarded him for years. Reeves leaned closer to the camera, his expression hardening. If you activate that device, the world will hear what was never meant to be heard. And when that happens, there will be consequences. The call ended abruptly, leaving the room in heavy silence. Victor looked at Elena, then at Marcus, then back at the hidden panel where the device was stored. The truth was no longer just about his hearing. It was about power, control, and how many lives had been shaped in silence. And now, the people who created that silence were coming to take it back. The alarms grew louder, and the mansion's calm finally broke. Victor made his decision in a single breath. He signed to Marcus, slow and clear, asking one question that mattered more than any contract or secret. Are you with them or with me? Marcus stared at him, the years of loyalty and buried guilt fighting across his face. Then he reached up and tore the earpiece from his ear, dropping it to the floor. He nodded once. With that small act, the lines were drawn. Victor moved to the desk and opened the hidden panel. His hands were steady now. Elena stepped closer, her fear mixing with relief. She signed, I can guide you, but once it starts, they'll lose control. Victor looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the cost she had already paid. He nodded. The device activated with soft vibration. Not a sound yet. Victor closed his eyes as Elena adjusted it carefully, her fingers trembling. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Victor felt something new. A pressure, a rhythm. His own heartbeat, loud and unfamiliar, rushed into his awareness. His eyes flew open, shock cutting through him like lightning. Tears welled as the silence he had known his entire life cracked open. Outside, security systems failed one by one. Marcus locked the doors manually and cut the external network feed. Dr. Reeves, people were losing access. Victor steadied himself, breathing hard, overwhelmed but grounded. He lifted his gaze to Elena and managed a small, broken laugh, not heard but felt. He signed, I can feel it. I'm here. But Elena wasn't smiling. She turned Victor's tablet toward him. While the device restore would have been suppressed, it was also doing something else. Streaming, broadcasting every recovered file, every sealed agreement, every hidden experiment to a secure public archive she had built in secret. The truth wasn't just returning to Victor. It was being released to the world. Sirens sounded in the distance now, not inside the mansion, but far beyond it. The kind that meant investigations, arrests, consequences. Victor understood then why Elena had said it wasn't a promise, but a risk. The tablet chimed softly. A final message appeared from Dr. Reeves, his calm gone. You've ended more than silence, it read. Victor didn't look away. He signed to Elena. Good. As the mansion settled into an uneasy quiet, Victor stood taller than he ever had. His hearing wasn't perfect. It was raw, fragile, and overwhelming, but it was his. The suppression was gone. The control was broken. The man who had been shaped by silence had reclaimed something stolen from him before he could choose. Elena began to step back, her role complete. Victor stopped her with a raised hand. He signed slowly with certainty, "You're not leaving." She shook her head, sadness in her eyes, and wrote one final note. "I was never just a maid." She turned her sleeve slightly, revealing a faint scar behind her ear, identical to the one Victor had just discovered on himself. In that moment, Victor realized the truth went even deeper than he feared. His story was only the beginning. Victor stared at Elena, the weight of the revelation settling in like a storm finally passing. The scars behind her ear mirrored his own, proof that their lives had been entangled long before they had met in the mansion. The device had done more than restore his hearing. It had uncovered a hidden network of control, experiments, and secrets that neither of them had expected. And now, with the truth exposed to the world, there was no going back. Elena lowered her gaze, but this time not in fear. She smiled faintly, the first genuine expression he had seen on her face. Victor stepped closer, signing carefully. "Who are you, really?" She hesitated, then wrote slowly on her notepad. "I was meant to protect you from the very people who created your silence. They never expected you to choose freedom on your own." Victor felt a mix of shock and relief. For decades, he had trusted only himself. Now, he realized that someone had quietly fought alongside him, even when he didn't know it. The mansion felt different. The walls, which had once pressed him with oppressive silence, now seemed alive with possibilities. Even the sounds of the storm outside, once drowned out, now felt like a welcome chorus. In the following days, Victor began rebuilding his life, cautiously but with purpose. He restored the mansion, not just as a home, but as a center for truth and accountability. He reviewed the archive Elena had released to the public, seeing the extent of the experiments and suppression that had affected countless lives. Legal authorities began investigations, but Victor remained focused not on revenge, but on justice and transparency. Marcus, too, found his place in the new order. The man who had once guarded Victor's silence became his closest ally, helping navigate both security and media tension. With Elena by his side, Victor realized that strength didn't have to be solitary. For the first time, he felt part of a team that valued honesty, courage, and loyalty above all else. Even as the world adjusted to the shocking revelations, Victor spent time reflecting on the past he had lost. He revisited childhood photos, smiled at memories of his parents, and forgave them for what they hadn't known or couldn't prevent. His hearing was still raw and overwhelming at times, but it was his own. Every sound, the ticking clock, the rustle of papers, Elena's quiet laughter, was a reminder that life could be reclaimed, even after decades of control. Elena remained close, but not as a servant. She became a partner, a guide, and a friend who had risked everything for the truth. Victor often caught himself wondering how many other lives had been shaped like his, how many more silences were waiting to be broken. But for now, he focused on the world in front of him, the one he could finally hear, feel, and change. And just as the sun rose one calm morning over the mansion, Victor realized that silence, once his prison, had become the foundation for something far greater. Freedom, truth, and a life finally lived on his own terms. The mansion was no longer just a house of wealth and power. It was a symbol of courage, resilience, and the unexpected bonds that can emerge when the truth is finally heard. Victor smiled, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of his new life fill him completely, knowing that while some secrets would always remain, the most important one, the one about himself, had finally been revealed.